Tony Moze, and I'm here with Jonah Berger. He is the author, best-selling author of the book Contagious: Why Things Catch On. He's also a marketing professor at the University of Pennsylvania at the Wharton School. How are you doing today, Jonah?
Great. Thanks so much for having me on, Tony. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting in on this call right here. I'm very thankful. I really enjoyed your book. Your book is amazing and also inspirational.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
I first off, I see your book, Contagious. It goes by this protocol that every marketer or anybody who's trying to pretty much market their brand or their product or whatever, or their message, there's this protocol that you call the steps approach. Can you at least give us just a little synopsis of what the steps is about?
Sure. So I've spent the last 15 years studying social influence and word of mouth. So why product ideas and behaviors catch on, from why some songs become popular to why some brands become unpopular, and looked at how word of mouth and social influence drives those trends. And what we see again and again is 6 factors, as you noted, that I put in a framework called the steps. And STEPS stands for social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. And each of those is basically a psychological principle that drives people to talk and share. And use the word recipe. I think that's a really good word to talk about it. Sometimes we see things go viral on the internet, or we see some, hip hop artists come from nowhere to be extremely popular, and we go, oh, it must be luck, it must be chance. But it's not complete luck, and it's not complete chance. There's really a science behind it, and a recipe in some ways of, we can say, hey, look, if you follow these principles, you're more likely to be successful. Mm-hmm. Can't guarantee, 1 billion views on a video, but we can guarantee you'll get more attention than if you don't follow these principles. And we've reliably shown that statistically in a whole bunch of studies. So I do a lot of work with both companies and individuals, helping them apply these principles to get their stuff to catch on.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So definitely there is, it's not just happening by whim or by chance. People are, perhaps doing something right, whether inadvertently or directly. Either they're consciously or unconsciously coming up with ideas that are making their ideas and their products and whatever they're trying to bring out to the world viral.
So, yeah, I think, if we think about a recipe, right?
Right.
The more you follow the recipe, the more likely what you cook tastes good.
Gotcha.
And so you're very right that some people may have gotten lucky, right? They didn't realize that this is the way to do it, and that they end up being successful. But we can also say, well, look, let me follow this recipe and I'll be more successful than I would be otherwise.
Great. So yeah, it's a recipe. Getting into it, because I figured I wanted to at least get people to at least get comfortable with the idea, because there's some things that I want to ask in regards to this recipe, the steps approach, that at least want people to have this in the back of their head. I see that your book has gone viral itself in other countries, right? I see, in the Ukraine, they had their own rendition. They made it a blue one, which was really interesting, because I see how in America the book came out orange, but over there in Ukraine, I believe, right? Am I correct? It was a blue version.
It is light blue cover, yeah.
Yeah. Well, now another question came up. Of course, I'm wondering, why did that come up as a blue cover as opposed to an orange color?
What's so interesting to me, and maybe interesting to some of your listeners,
mm-hmm.
is how much control you have over parts of the process and parts that you don't. And so as an author, you have some control over your writing, but you don't have control over everything that happens with the book. So we sold, for example, the foreign rights to different countries, and most of them actually didn't even ask what cover they should use. Many of them didn't want to pay the U.S. royalties to use U.S. cover.
Mm-hmm.
They came up with their own sort of bootleg version of the cover. So, in some places it's blue, in other countries the color's a different color. In some countries they made their own rendition of the sort of logo that's on the front. And so everybody did it differently. I think for the U.S. cover, though, we did spend a lot of time thinking about the right color and the right way to make it look. And as you mentioned, it's orange. And we picked orange in particular because there's some nice research on sort of the psychology of color.
Right.
Whereas bright, really vibrant colors get more attention. Orange is associated with action.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some other colors, for example, like a purple, might be associated with inaction, more
mm-hmm.
relaxed rather than active. And so given that something catching on being contagious is active, we wanted to pick a really active color.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember looking at a little research, when I was trying to come up with my brand idea, and I recall that orange definitely was one of those colors that gave up that very high energy color. But now it made me wonder if that color is universal or if that's just relative to just its own respective country. If and like I know that orange definitely I can see how that is applicable to ours, but now it has me thinking apparently not so much in Ukraine.
It's a good question, interesting question, and I think that certain colors are certainly more vibrant for everybody, but colors also have unique meaning.
Mm-hmm.
In certain countries, for example, the flags are different colors, and people may associate colors with one thing versus another.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not sure why they picked the cover for sure, but what's been fun, actually, on the bottom of our website, I think the book's out in like 27 or 28 languages at this point.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to sort of see the different covers and the sort of creative tack that different people took.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The second question I want to ask within that same question is, now I see how that the recipe, the steps approach, is applicable here. Now, does the same steps approach that were discussed in the book apply to other countries and cultures?
So let's take one of the principles, social currency. So
Sure.
The idea of social currency is we're more likely to share things that make us look good rather than make us look bad. So some people talk a lot about new restaurants in town because they want to seem like a foodie. Some people talk about, the newest iPhone because they want to seem like they're in technology. Other people talk about sports. Other people talk about unsigned artists as a way to show they're sort of a hip-hop head. Mm-hmm. And so what we talk about is the signal of who we are. That's true across all people. It's true for, 65-year-old men. It's true for 16-year-old girls. What we talk about, though, that gives us those desired signals is certainly different to different ages and cultural backgrounds and countries, right? So what it means to look good in the U.S., for example, may be slightly different than what it means to look good in China. A 65-year-old guy might care about his golf handicap, whereas a 16-year-old girl cares a lot about celebrity news. And so what we talk about and share is still a signal to who we are, whether we're 65 or 16, but which thing allows us to get those desired signals may differ a little bit.
Got it. Okay. So like I see in your book, you've broken the steps down. You've given. You look at one chapter and it talks about social currency. The next one talks about triggers, and you managed to in the book you've broken it down into separate components where you for each person, place, or thing, you use examples just so that people could get an idea of how each component worked. Now, what was a situation in which you've seen an entity or product or idea use all the steps and become extremely viral?
That's a good question, and I think there are some examples of this I talk about in the book, but you don't need to do all of them.
Okay.
And I think it's one of those things. Sometimes if you try to do them all, you might end up doing none of them really well. Whereas if you try to do one or two really well and focus on that first, you can do another marketing initiative around a different one. So let me use myself as an example. So taking social currency, for example, the idea that people share things to make them look good. Mm-hmm. We came out with a limited edition version of the book. We made it $100 a copy. It has a black cover and signed limited edition copy book. That was to play on the idea of social currency, but we did something else to play in a different dimension. So triggers is all about the idea that there's something top of mind and tip of tongue. Yeah. If you're thinking about something, you're more likely to talk about it. So the book came out around cold and flu season. Lots of people get cold and flu and sneezing. Mm-hmm. And so we made a set of orange tissues, little packets of orange tissues I would take around when I gave talks. That said, don't you wish your ideas were this contagious? Trying to remind people that when they're sneezing and catching colds and flus from others, ideas are also contagious, and linking that sneezing that people are doing a lot to the ideas from the book. And so creating a trigger there. And so for each principle in the book, we did a different marketing initiative in some sense, mm-hmm. but taken together, they covered all bases.
Great. And I see you've done extensive research on marketing. There were a few studies that you conducted that interested me a lot, which revolved around a certain theme. It was the idea of identity signaling and divergence. Now I have been created a niche following of people who enjoy hip hop and reading books, which I feel could relate to this theme. Could you tell us a little bit about what identity signaling and divergence means, and why is that so important?
Yeah, so I think a good good example is, we make inferences about people based on the car they drive, the clothes they wear, things along those lines, right? So,
Hmm.
me, for example, I have a young face. People look at me, they go, "Oh, how could you be a professor? You look so young."
Yeah.
So when I give a presentation, I often wear a jacket, right? I wear a sport coat. Why do I do that? Because I want people to take me seriously. I much
True.
prefer to wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but I know particularly if I haven't met these people before, for them to think I'm looking young is not going to do me very well. So
Right.
I try to dress a certain way to signal a certain identity. And that's this idea of identity signaling, right? The words we use, the clothes we wear, the cars we drive. Someone drives around in a minivan, people assume they're a soccer mom, right?
Yeah.
And so these things that we do communicate things about us to others. But the idea of divergence is really interesting. So, often we think about social influence and we think about imitation. We say,
Hmm.
well, yeah, people are influenced by others. They do the same things that others are doing. So, if somebody starts, for example, wearing a certain type of hat or a certain type of jersey, or someone starts a certain style, other people copy that style. And that's definitely true. There's some imitation, but there's also the opposite of imitation, which, as you said, is called divergence.
Yeah.
And that's the case when one set of people starts doing something, another set of people might not want to do it anymore,
Huh.
right? So, like, there's a political initiative, for example, that the Republicans used to like, but Democrats start supporting it. Maybe the Republicans don't want to support it anymore because it doesn't signal the identity they want it to signal. Or
Right.
we did a study actually a number of years ago with those yellow wristbands, Livestrong wristbands, where we sold them to some students in the dorm on the university campus. And then we also sold them later to sort of the geeks on campus, the academic focus dorm. And what happens when the geeks started wearing the wristband, the original people didn't want to wear it anymore, right? It
Huh.
changed the meaning of the signal. And I think you see it in music a lot, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if you think people are really into indie music, and once artists start going pop and they start going mainstream, some of those indie folks say, well, I don't like them anymore, right?
Huh.
I like their older stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it is it's unlikely that their older stuff for all these types of artists is better, right? But
Right.
part of it is like being there first with a signal of who you are. Right? If you're the first person to follow an artist from, an unsigned artist from an area that nobody knows about, is only on local radio but not on national radio, you're one of the first person to support them, it's a signal of identity. But if everybody's supporting them, it doesn't have that signal value anymore. And so sometimes people abandon things they once liked to avoid being thought of as someone they're not.
That makes so much sense. I mean, like, I was really big, and I still am a fan and follower of underground hip hop. As they would call it, a few different names, like alternative hip hop, underground hip hop, conscious rap. And like I noticed that the followers would definitely have those same sentiments. If it was like somebody like Common, they were like fully embracing towards him in his older days back in the 90s. But once he started getting more, mainstream, commercial in hip hop, people started like, abandoning that. They were just like, he's not like the old Common. He's preaching about, or he's talking about stuff that's not as necessarily quote unquote conscious. Wow, that's just amazing. That whole idea of identity signaling and divergence. How if something doesn't apply to that person anymore, they're perhaps quick to abandon it. I guess we'll go to this now. The rapper Drake. Did you see that video called Hotline Bling where it was it like went viral? It was like, they used to call me on my cell phone. I don't know if you've seen that video. Yeah, that, I mean, that's like, in terms of virility, like I thought of you automatically when I saw that video, and how everyone was doing so many different renditions. Like they had so many different renditions, just making fun of it on different memes and everything like that on social media. And I'm assuming, did you see that video with Donald Trump where he did his rendition of it?
I have not seen that one, no.
Oh my God, it was uncomfortably funny to me. Like he was just he did the same video, just the same dance, the same background, and like it had me thinking. Like I was wondering if Donald Trump was smart for pulling that off in marketing himself for his campaign. Like I don't know. I was like, maybe he's onto something. It had me thinking like, what is he doing? Is he trying to appeal to a younger crowd? I don't know. It was really interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and one question you raised, and by the way, I don't know the answer to, but have thought a little about, is, it's one thing for people to share a piece of content, but it's another thing for people to create their own version of that content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with Hotline Bling, people create their own version of Hotline Bling. It's different than what it is for others. And so, why do they do that? Why does that some more than others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then it has me thinking in terms of that specific video, like what is it that Drake did that made it so viral? I mean, like I know Drake has his name already, but like what did he do? Was it just the simplicity of it? I mean, I mean,
Yeah, and this is something I think is important, particularly for an audience like yours, right?
mm-hmm.
It's one thing if you're already popular to create a piece of content that gets a lot of attention, right? There are millions of people out there that have bought Drake albums, that are waiting for his next song, and so it's really easy if you're already famous to get attention for something you're doing. I think what's much harder, but also more interesting, is if you're not so famous to build your audience by using word of mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not just tap your audience, but really build it. And that to me is the power, right? I mean, very simply, how can you turn your customers, your listeners, the people that already like you into advocates? How can you get each of them to bring in one new or a couple new people that might be interested in what you have to offer? And that's really the value of word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
If you're an up-and-coming artist or you're an entrepreneur trying to get a business idea to catch on, you don't have a big marketing budget, right? You don't have a lot of money for advertising. You don't have a big following already. How do you take that small following and double it? How can you triple it, right? Based on using the power of word of mouth.
Right. I was going to say, going back to the earlier questions, but I have to ask in a different way. Do you think that the recipe, the steps program that, the approach that you use in your book, do you think that it was applicable to a society back in ancient Greece?
To some degree, what's interesting about these principles, they're about psychology, right? It's not like people in the 1900s didn't care about looking good or triggers. It's not like people don't see things in the environment and remind them of other things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if I said peanut butter and, what word might come to mind?
Jelly.
Jelly,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so that's been true for a long time, right? It's not like one thing doesn't remind people of something else. So at the core, these principles aren't about technology, they're about psychology.
Yeah.
And, the first word of mouth wasn't when the internet rolled around. It was like one caveman nudging another and going, don't eat that, right? Poison it. And so word of mouth's been around for a long time, and I think the psychology has been very similar. How we apply it is a little different based on technology, but it's still very much the same.
Got it. Okay, so here I start asking some interesting. I thought it was kind of like quirky questions. I wanted to ask you, if information were a cold, flu, or virus, what passageway of someone's body or whatever orifice would it enter through first?
It's a question I've never got before. I think the main way we process information are through our eyes and our ears.
Okay.
Right? So, we hear word of mouth from others. And when we hear word of mouth, it's often, auditory. We hear it from someone else, or our eyes reading it online. But also when we're talking about identity things, for example, we see what others are doing, right? Mm-hmm. We see it and we either decide to imitate it or do something else just by visually observing what others are doing. And so I think the eyes and the ears are two big channels for social influence.
Great. So I guess if someone doesn't want something being so contagious, because I know there's some people out there who are just like, ugh, I don't want that in my darn head. People are like, I don't want to freaking hear that shit. Like, I think that stuff is crap, whatever, and it's like they would have to cover their eyes and their ears so that they won't be infected by this information.
That's a really interesting point, because I think, sometimes we don't like being influenced, right? We like thinking we're independent, we're, untouchable, nobody influences us. But also influence is a really good thing, right? I mean, if you think about it, if every time we wanted to figure out what album to buy or stock to invest in or restaurants to try, we had to or collect all the information ourselves, it would be really effortful. And what's nice is, you walk by a restaurant, it's full of people, you say, wow, a bunch of people there, it must be good. And so often social information makes our life easier, not more difficult.
Right. What was the weirdest thing to date? Because I know this book, Contagious, was published, it was recent, but once again, it's not as like it came out yesterday. I mean, it's still recent. But I want to know, in terms of you, like after the book was published, like if you found anything else or anything new that was like weird that to date that you found like that went viral.
Oh, I mean, what's great about working in an area like this is every week there's something new that gets a lot of attention, right? So, we can think about the Harlem Shake, we can think about Gangnam Style, we can think about all these things that have become popular since the book came out. But, we've also done a lot of research on why people talk and share. For example, online versus offline is different. We share different things online versus offline. The process different. Is what we talk about and share different when we're talking to one person versus many people. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we share? We're not sharing controversial things. So we're doing a lot of research, and we'll be doing research on these principles. But what's often fun is just to work with different individuals and organizations to apply the ideas. So working on a couple projects with Google at the moment that are really interesting, and work with lots of companies, large and small, to apply the principles. And I think what's most exciting to me is just getting the ideas out there. There's so much good science research out there, but if it's not discussed in a way that people can understand, often academic papers are super boring. And so part of the fun of writing a book is really putting that science out there in a way that people can understand and use.
Great, great. And then, I like to look at questions. I like to be a philosopher myself, so I look at a question and then I like to just look at in so many different ways. And I guess another one I wanted to ask was, what was the thing you thought, like, what was an idea or a product or whatever that went viral that you thought was unlikely that going viral actually that went viral? Like, what was an unlikely thing that you thought initially was like, this is weird, but then, like, through time it started picking up the momentum and it just went crazy?
I think songs are often a good example of that, because you ever notice the first time you hear a song, you're like, oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And then you hear it again, and you're like, you hear it again, the radio's playing it a bunch, and it starts to grow on you.
Yeah.
The first time you like it, but you start, and so that's the principle of psychology called mere exposure. The more you hear something, the more you see something, the more you like it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, I'll hear a song, or I'll hear about a movie or something like that, and I'll go, I'm not going to be into that. And then you hear it 5 or 10 times, and it starts to become more familiar, and so you start liking it. So I think it's interesting. It's often hard for us to predict how much we'll like something after we've heard it a few times.
Now I love marketing. Marketing is all about what I went for my undergrad in psychology, and of course I'm finishing up with my master's in psychology. So psychology is something that I love, and I think marketing is a psychology, of course. And I remember the age-old notion of it's for anyone to learn or remember anything, or at least this is what I know, is that when a learned behavior comes from pairing or associating one stimuli or perhaps a pair of stimulus or a pair of stimuli or with another. So pairing one stimulus with another stimulus, and that's how people remember. And the one example I always use is the Budweiser commercial, where it's always a gorgeous babe in a bikini holding on to a can of Budweiser. And that's what prompted, or at least that's what triggered men, or at least that was the market then, to purchase beer. And so I was thinking, do you believe companies nowadays are challenged with coming up with more complex ideas of how to market their product, or do you believe consumers still fall for the same basic pairing of one stimulus with another?
Yeah, marketing's harder than it used to be, because consumers are smarter than they used to be. They're more aware of marketers' tricks. We know that if an ad says something, it doesn't mean that it's true. We know not to believe ads because we know they're trying to sell us things. So, our trust, consumers' trust in companies is definitely lower than it used to be. And I think that's one reason that word of mouth is so important. We can't trust the company. The company will always say the product is good, Budweiser tastes delicious. You use this shampoo, you'll get an attractive spouse. Never seen a shampoo ad that says, hey, use this shampoo, you get an ugly spouse, right? Or drink this beer and you'll be unpopular.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether to trust the ad or not. We can trust a friend. Right? A friend will say, hey, I tried that beer, I used that shampoo, it was great or it was terrible.
Yeah.
And because they'll be honest, because they'll be more objective, we can really trust that information and rely on it.
Got it. Yeah. So word of mouth is the biggest thing, right? I think is how things spread. That's the most credible piece of evidence there is someone's word of mouth.
Yeah, someone else has been in a situation and it's similar to us.
All right. Have you seen any rap or hip hop songs? I think I know I asked this. I guess perhaps when I think of things, I look at it in so many different ways that perhaps I never figure out if it's repetitive or not. But have you seen any rap or hip hop songs or videos which use the steps method that went viral?
It's not a video per se, but I will tell a fun story sort of about someone applying the steps. So there's a hip hop artist out of LA called who read the book. His manager gave him the book, and he came out with a $100 mixtape. So one of the examples in the book is about a $100 cheesesteak. Loved that idea. Said, look, $5, $10. Um, but what people are buying is they're buying part of the artist, right? They're buying I believe in this person. They're buying I was there first, part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than just selling for $5, I said, look, we're gonna sell it for $100. We're only gonna make a certain a number of them. We're gonna put them out with signed limited edition versions, and sell 1,000 of them. And they sold out in a day. Right?
Wow.
Jay-Z bought a bunch. Other
Wow.
people bought a bunch. And they were hugely successful with it. So applying the principles of the book. So not so much a video per se, but a great example of someone using the idea to be quite successful.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. All right, cool. Looking instead of companies or brands, and looking more on a micro level, because I have friends now who are entrepreneurs and they're owning their own business and whatnot. But I want to look right now in terms of employees, instead of employers. What types of employee positions or college majors have gone viral?
So I've done a bit of work with LinkedIn, big company that has a bunch of data around it. And I think what's interesting is you see big trends in different positions, right? So data science, 10 years ago, no one had heard about the idea of data science. Now
Mm-hmm.
being a data scientist is really popular. There's a funny sort of old joke and sort of arcane that, what do they call what's the data scientist? Statistician that lives in Silicon Valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
A cooler term, data scientist and statistician. And so, we see trends in even the way we call different positions. But I think what's exciting, just more generally, is you're seeing a big overlap between, domains that were usually quite different. So the hard sciences, things like math, statistics, and data analysis, and the soft science, which is the social science and psychology. And really seeing, people combining those two.
Sweet. Wow. There's been a rise in like the culture of network marketing. I've been new to to experiencing this with peers and getting into this, multi-level marketing. Looking again on a micro level, what can an individual entrepreneur do to make his name memorable or contagious?
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about multi-level marketing. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's really useful, but sometimes it's a little more like a scam, right? It's like
Yeah.
thinking about how you can make money off your friends and peers.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing for someone who's trying to be an entrepreneur is really simple. Think about segmenting, target positioning. Who's out there? Who's my target? What are the people that would like what I have to offer? And how can I position my product or service, whatever it is, to appeal to those folks? And then building on that, once I've figured out the early folks, right, the early people that might like my product, service, or idea, how do I use them to market to the next set of folks?
Got it.
And people often talk about the difference between are you selling a vitamin or a painkiller? And the difference is, well, a painkiller is something you need.
Yeah.
Right? I can't do without a painkiller. If I'm in pain, I need a painkiller. A vitamin's a nice to have, but it's not a need to have.
Huh.
And I would suggest, if you're an entrepreneur, think first about the need to haves, right? Who are the people that need to have this thing you're offering? And only once you've gone after them first, then use them to help you get the folks that don't need it but might be interested in it.
Huh. Well, there you go, entrepreneurs. You people who are doing network marketing and multi-level marketing. That's how you're gonna have to position and target your prospective clientele. So I heard you talk about vitamins, which is also I wanted to. This is a question I wanted to ask. If another quirky one of mine, if information were a medicine, what medicine would companies use to kill the virility of their opponent companies?
That's also an interesting question. And I think, a lot of times you do see not only advertising, but counter advertising. Right? When a company comes out with a really good campaign, actually at the moment, I'm not sure which company, maybe Verizon, has an ad with a bunch of different colored balls rolling down a hill to sort of illustrate the statistics behind one of their claims. And another company sort of knocked off that ad, did their own version, but shows how their particular product or service is better. And so a lot of times you do see sort of companies competing over which information's right.
Okay. Sweet. Okay, so two things I wanted to ask. What if we could encourage artists such as singers, rappers, etc., to get them, to get their message to spread? What is something that they could do to make their message viral?
Yeah, so first thing you think about is the steps, right? Think about those key drivers that what cause the thing to catch on. There are a bunch of free resources on the website, so just Jonah, Jonah, Berger, Berger.com. They're all free. You don't have to spend money. It's an application guide you can use, a one-pager to help you think a little bit through the steps. If you want to check out the book, you can. But, really thinking, I think, as an artist, it's really important to be a good artist.
Yeah.
It's also important to be a good businessman or woman, right? And I think often artists say, well, yeah, I'm an artist. I'm creative. All that's really important. But you either need to have someone managing the business or you need to manage it. And thinking about, well, how am I going to make sure I'm not only an artist, but I'm a successful artist, right? You can make music you love. You can make paintings that you enjoy, but that's not just your hobby, but your livelihood. You got to figure out how to get someone else to pay you to do it. And so word of mouth and social influence is a great, cheap way to get your message out there.
Wow, nice. And last but not least, because I'm always interested, what is a good book, or what are some good books you've read in recent times that you recommend?
Are we talking fiction or nonfiction? The fiction book first, just because I read one recently was very good. It's called Lexicon.
Okay.
Which is all about actually sort of what we're talking about. Imagine a world in which people completely can persuade one another based on the words we use. So it's a fiction book, but it's interesting to sort of think about language and persuasion. But in terms of a nonfiction book that I've read recently that I like, one of my oldie but goodie favorites, a book called Moze. So
Yes.
it's all about why certain messages or ideas stick, how to communicate ideas and make them memorable. That's one I like a lot. Another book I like a lot is called Predictably Irrational.
Yes.
It's all about how, behavioral economics, sometimes we make decisions that seem weird, why we make those decisions, and what drives our behavior. So those are a couple ones I've enjoyed recently.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jonah Berger.